this whole standard of perfection, where does it come from?
I think part of it is definitely the hustle culture, but a great part of it is probably us misunderstanding what really truly brings you success. Success the way it is understood in the culture in general, mainstream culture. It's professional success, a high level of excellence. Professionalism is very often equated to high level of excellence, financial success. So we very often do not understand where that comes from, because in our brain we have this equation that success requires hard work, sacrifices, sweat and blood. Then we will have to put these things into whatever we are doing, otherwise we won't believe that we will achieve success. But research shows that the massive success doesn't come just to the people who are the most hardworking or the smartest, because if that was the truth, I think a very different set of people would be the richest people and the most accomplished and the most famous.
What we as women, how we can actually start viewing our flaws, our imperfections as our strengths.
So I would say that
Hey loves, do me a quick favor and hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are tuning into this. It helps grow the show more than you know. Thank you so much again and enjoy.
I want to start with, what is it about us women and not accepting our flaws? We think our flaws are the worst thing ever. And you've written a book about turning your flaws into pretty much your superpower.
yeah, that's actually true. I like to use that word superpower when we talk about our flaws, but I think it's the society that brings us up. It's just the predominant paradigm of our contemporary society that girls, women, later women, are supposed to be perfect in everything that they do. You are supposed to be a perfect woman in terms of your physique and everything, but also a perfect wife, a perfect housekeeper. And by housekeeper, I mean it has to be immaculate and you have to cook perfectly. And then you also have to make a career and everything has to be perfect. So I think if there's so much pressure, and perfection is the opposite of flaws. So naturally flaws become, it's just the conclusion that we make that flaws is something horrible to be eradicated.
Mm-hmm. And because I'm a recovering perfectionist myself, it still comes up. How was writing Flawsome also bringing up
it was
any of the flaws? Did it bring it up? How did you navigate through that?
You know, I constantly struggle. So I used to call myself recovering perfectionist because I loved that term until I understood that perfectionism is just part of me. It's just my quality, which is forever there. So the question is not about how do I recover from being myself. The question is how do I live with that shackle in a way, because perfectionism is hard burden, not just on myself, but also on the people in my life. So naturally, I struggle with that every once in a while. And whenever I feel the perfectionism is kicking in, I just remind myself that sometimes it's better done than perfect, or sometimes you have to just push through it. And very often perfectionism is just masquerading, or something else is masquerading to be perfectionism. And that's, this paralysis from being afraid or being overwhelmed or being too stressed or tired. And rather than just admitting that, I'm just not ready for this task, we kind of hide behind the idea, I want to be perfect. So very often when I start doing, with writing, it was the same. I would sit and not write because it just doesn't come. And then I tell myself, just write. You don't have to be perfect. So that constant reminder, conscious reminder that just do the thing. Don't aim for perfectionism, keep doing. And I kept doing that throughout the book all the time.
Oh my gosh. Did you throw away chapters?
Oh, yeah.
Or rewrite them?
So I did, of course. I rewrote things. And before this life, I was an artist. So and I've always been a little bit like this fiery personality. So I remember when I was a kid and I had to do art for school, for my art school. I would sometimes spend evenings and then something goes a little bit wrong and I just go so like, and then you just destroy it.
Oh my goodness.
and then after a while you think, but that wasn't so bad. And I learned, I think, that lesson a very long time ago. And of course, as children, we don't always manage our emotions very well, or don't always know how to deal with them very well. So we sometimes overreact. So I wouldn't do that now, I think. But I did learn that hard lesson that sometimes when you think that something is imperfect, you destroy it. And then you suddenly realize it wasn't bad at all. And why did I do that? So I have eradicated some chapters or some paragraphs from my book, but I never regretted them because they just had to be changed.
Wow. And I want to kind of like double click on the fact that we're recording this in your hometown of Tallinn, Estonia. Were you born here?
It's going to make things more complicated. I was born in Belarus.
Okay.
But I have lived all my life here. It was an accident that I was born somewhere else.
Wow. So, because for my audience who, may not know directly who you are, you've literally created such a place, a magnitude for people like me who've been coming for the last 5 years to a tiny, tiny little town called Tallinn, Estonia.
Yeah.
And people don't really know why we come to Estonia every year. And they know a person or they know a company, but they don't know the real reason behind why. And I want you to share.
I will have to take the blame for that. I know there are a few Estonians in our company in Mindvalley, and it's now like quite obvious. But these few Estonians are there also on. It's my fault. So yes, I'm from here originally, and I'm ex-wife of Bhushan. And when we got married, it was a long time ago, we chose not to move to Estonia, but I was always very attached to my homeland. So we kept coming back all over and over again. And then maybe Bhushan changed, maybe Estonia changed, maybe Mindvalley changed, but now somehow it feels organic that we are here. So we did come here 20 years after. Yeah, but when you mentioned Mindvalley and my involvement there, this was another interesting journey for me because, yes, I have been in Mindvalley from the start. And sometimes when people ask, how did you end up in Mindvalley? I like to say I registered it because that's the truth. But it took me a few years to take pride in that, or to recognize that I owned every little bit of whatever Mindvalley has become. Very often we women, we take on the secondary position in the lives of people in our family, let's say our close people, and in what they're doing. And for me, that was a journey to learn to just accept that I'm part of it. And even if I'm not the visible or the famous co-founder of Mindvalley, I still am.
Mm-hmm. All right, loves. I see you. 98% of you watching right now are not subscribed, and that's totally cool, and I so appreciate it. But if you're enjoying this episode, if this is dropping valuable content for you, then why not join our fam? By subscribing, you'll never miss a beat, especially on the amazing tips, advice, and insights that we have on our incredible guests from around the world. Plus, you'll get a chance to win some incredible prizes. And it's absolutely free. It keeps us connected to everything that we're doing and helps us get even more and more incredible guests. And it would mean the world to me if you could just hit the subscribe button. And I promise to make you even more valuable content.
Yeah, and I think it has such a beauty and a reverence, because I think now it's becoming more common to see the face behind the strength. It's when The Rock became who he was. Yeah. Everyone started talking about, well, did you know his wife is the one and his manager, and she's the queen behind the scenes of who made The Rock, who that person was today that everybody loves. And I feel like it's so easy to give somebody the credit because they're so front facing, and rarely we see, well, now we all know why we come to Estonia for the last 5 years. And it really has become, been because of you. And it's changed the way how I have interacted with a lot of my audience and telling them, why am I going to a medieval town every year for summer holidays for 2 weeks?
Where we don't have summer, classically speaking.
Where you don't have summer, but I love it because it's way different from where I am right now in the U.S. Austin, Texas is way too hot, 90 days of 100-degree weather or above. So no, thank you. But we look forward to it because you guys fell in love here 20 years ago. You started the company. You have now had millions of people fall in love with this tiny little town. You've put Tallinn, Estonia on the map.
Thank you.
And believe me when I say this is such a foodie town.
Oh, yeah.
it's so cultural. It's multicultural in so many ways. Forget Stockholm, forget Helsinki. I mean, this is where it's at, and I'm not even biased. It's because of, I mean, I've been coming here for. I got our marriage tattoo here when Ajit and I got married 7 years ago. It was 7 years ago here in Tallinn. So how does it feel to now the last 4 or 5 years that Mindvalley University has been happening, that you've been able to share such pride? Because I know Estonians are very prideful of their beautiful country, and I see it now.
You know, it changed every time Mindvalley came here. It changed. So the first Mindvalley University, I remember I was so overwhelmed, and I thought, I remember that saying, you know, there are two good moments when guests come and when they leave. But I'm much more at peace with that now. I actually enjoy that everybody's here, and sometimes you meet people in the city because it's the comfortable size of the city. It's not too small so that you know everyone, but it's also not too big, so you actually see each other when you're in the city. So that's kind of nice. It's also, the other thing is that it's been changing in the past 5 years. So of course it is a pleasure to see people coming back, but we are going to make a break because people like diversity, it seems. So the next one is not going to be here, and maybe that's good. You know, sometimes you have to deprive people of the little gem for them to start appreciating it again.
That's very true. It's very true. And I want to segue into, you shared about kind of being, because you are the backbone of this incredible behemoth called Mindvalley, which personally I'm so grateful for. Obviously, it led me to my lover of my life, Ajit. And I want to segue into basically what we as women, how we can actually start viewing our flaws, our imperfections as our strengths, as you talk about in the book.
Mm-hmm. So I would say that I'll leave Mindvalley where it is for that conversation. I think it starts with first recognizing that we do have flaws and imperfections, because maybe somewhere on the subconscious level we know that we are not perfect, and there is a difference between accepting your flaws as in being at peace with them versus knowing that of course I'm not perfect, but. And that's a huge difference. So it starts with honesty. And that's exactly what I wanted to say. You have to learn to be honest with yourself. And this is a tricky thing, because we think we are honest with ourselves. That's just default. That's a point of delusion, that when we're delusional, we are not aware of that. Because if we were aware of our own delusion, it would be not a delusion, but something else. So the trick is to actually start seeing the different ways how we lie to ourselves. And if you've read my book, then you probably know what I'm hinting at. And the other thing is to just recognize that I may be wrong. And in all the interactions, even when I get upset with someone, or if I think that person behaved in a certain way and I don't like it, I still remind myself that I may be wrong. And I may be wrong because I don't know the context, because I don't know the reasons, because maybe my values are not exactly the right ones. So there are so many ways why I may be wrong. And I think it's very refreshing, because the moment when you realize that you may be wrong, it gives you the courage to be honest with yourself and to start seeing the things that we very often refuse to see, or refuse to even acknowledge that this is a flaw, and a flaw is a problem. It doesn't mean that you have to eradicate it, but it is a problem if you are not aware of it, or if you refuse to be aware of it, or if you refuse to not acknowledge so much, but to count with it. Like my perfectionism. We very often wear perfectionism as a chip of honor. Because when you ask somebody at an interview, job interview, so what is your flaw? I'm perfectionist. Do you take it as a flaw if you're saying that? Probably not. And that's the thing. It's learning to accept your flaws, and that's the first step. But truly to accept them as in, I know that these are the ways that this characteristic is making my life worse or harder, or maybe my interactions a little more difficult. But I'm willing to accept that this is who I am, and what am I to do to actually turn those weaknesses into superpowers. Let me give you a very impolitical example. I'm a very leisurely person, and I could call it laziness. But there are benefits to that, because I am a natural optimizer. I would not do things which that's probably called optimization. I would not do things which are not necessary. So
I need to learn from you.
so, but the other thing is that because I know that I tend to take it easy and to not compromise my well-being, I also know that sometimes I have to slow down and tell myself, like, okay, maybe this is the moment where you have to put it aside and put on a slightly different characteristic. And yes, maybe I'm forever the lazy kind. I like to sleep in the morning. I don't like to wake up with an alarm clock. But knowing that, you know how to live with that, how to operate around that, how to use it to your advantage when you can, and how to not let it be in your way when you can't.
To really love those parts of yourself that maybe is not for everyone, but you see it as those strengths.
Just be kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we all imperfect, so
And what's
it's not the worst thing that could be.
right? Yes, and I feel like this whole standard of perfection, where does it come from, anyways? Did you come across any studies that showed why we have such this high standard of excellence? Some people will say, well, I just have a high standard of excellence. But what is the standard? Where is that being measured for, to, by?
I actually haven't researched that, but I have a lot of feelings about that now that you're asking it. So they're a little bit fresh, maybe. I think part of it is definitely the hustle culture, but a great part of it is probably us misunderstanding what really truly brings you success. So, success is obviously not a linear thing, no matter how we define it. And I'm talking about success currently very, very narrowly. I don't want to talk about success the way we like to talk nowadays, like the well-being and happiness and whatnot. Sure. Let's talk about success the way it is understood in the culture in general, mainstream culture, right? It's professional success, high level of excellence. Professionalism is very often equated to high level of excellence, financial success. So we very often do not understand where that comes from. We understand there needs to be work put into it. There needs to be some kind of effort or straining, sacrificing something. And these are the linear things. But research shows that the massive success doesn't come just to the people who are the most hardworking or the smartest. Because if that was the truth, right. I think a very different set of people would be the richest people and the most accomplished and the most famous. So there is also this inexplicable component to success. But because we do not understand that, we go for things which we understand, which is hustling, which is putting in the hours, which is sacrificing the things which are important. Because if in our brain we have this equation that success requires hard work, sacrifices, sweat and blood, then we will have to put these things into whatever we are doing. Otherwise, we won't believe that we will achieve success. And if we achieve it, we won't believe that it is actually sustainable or true. We start thinking that maybe I'm an imposter and people will figure me out. So I think there is a lot of this just belief, how we understand it. And if you look at pop culture, whether it's movies, music, books, the story is being told over and over again. This one person who was willing to sacrifice everything, their well-being, their health, their sleep at night, do everything, swallow the insults. They're the ones who are on top of Mount Olympus. So we collectively believe in that story. And the higher we set the bar, the more effort we put, and the higher we keep pushing that bar. So it's just a never-ending story, I think.
Right. And it's also you're giving accolades and credit to the people who are literally dying to create this company or to do the next thing or to do the impossible. Yeah. And then when they are hospitalized or if they fall sick, then it's like, well, they shouldn't have been working too hard at their job. So you're penalized both ways.
True.
And
because you see, the story of you overcoming everything makes a much better movie script.
That's very true.
Can you imagine a movie about a person who achieved massive success and flow?
They'd be like, wait, what? It wouldn't get funded as a film. So what has been the most challenging aspect of your own journey in navigating your flaws?
Okay, thank God because I was thinking of my 46 years and thinking, there have been so many things. But when navigating my flaws.
Whether in marriage, business, in motherhood, you're a mom of two.
The hardest was to actually realize that it's okay to be flawed. Not to see it as the end of the world. I have been perfectionist from my early age, and I was straight A student all my life. I was so good, they sent me to meet with the president when I graduated.
Oh my gosh.
It's horrible, honestly. So I of course I knew I had I had my own quirks. Like, I love to sleep. So I had my own quirks. I knew about them, but I always saw them as something to fight. So, for example, I think I'll just bring an example. When I was 40 years old, I had accomplished everything because, perfectionist, ambitious, hardworking despite being lazy by nature. So
I would never think you are, quote, lazy. Wow.
I don't use that word very often because it has such a negative connotation, but I do love slow mornings. I really do love to slow down, to be at peace, to not rush.
I love that you said leisurely.
Yeah.
And that's a great reframe.
It's a little more political word than saying that I'm lazy. But laziness is the main engine behind the progression of humankind and our civilization, because whatever we created to avoid work, starting with the first tools. So, but that is like a segue. So I was 40 years old and I had achieved success by a lot of people's standards, married, to children, a successful company, doing what I love, traveling the world, having spectacular glitter-splattered parties.
Yep.
And a lot of people thought I was an inspiration, but I didn't feel like that. And I think the hardest part about recognizing your flaws was when you try to beat yourself up for not being what you think you should be. So I think my first face-to-face with imperfection was the idea that how dare you, sorry if I swear, bitch, to be unhappy with everything that you've got. So, and it was just so heavy until one point I realized, like, I just cannot keep beating myself up for what I am. I do not feel happy. And even if I don't have an explanation to that, that's just the fact of it. And that was probably the hardest thing, just to say, it's okay. It's not how I'm supposed to be, but that's how I am. And can you just leave yourself alone and allow yourself to be what you are for a moment?
And to be able to not be okay in the acceptance of that is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
We have to learn to be kind to ourselves. And we have to notice when we are not kind, because that's the thing. It's sometimes hard to notice when you're not kind, because we are not kind in those moments when we don't have the capacity to notice it. When we have made a mistake or made a blunder, or, I feel shame. And as a perfectionist, a smart woman, I'm sure you relate to that. When you feel that you have made a blunder, your natural tendency probably is also to dig deeper and to to show yourself all the things that you've made wrong. And that's exactly the moment when you need kindness the most. There is this analogy, when you have a wound, stabbing it again doesn't help. And that's what we do with our unkindness. We don't let the wound heal. We keep stabbing it.
Yeah. It never gets to close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's how do you stick to your own authentic self-truths? Because you founded a company that is very much the premier company in personal growth, personal development, that is always about growth and development. So how do you, and I can imagine sometimes that it can be conflicting for what you're actually feeling as to what a whole behemoth that you have created is also creating. How do you stick to your own values and your own authentic truth as a result of that?
So I'll first give you like a somewhat humorous answer. It's I ask something similar to of Guy Kawasaki, and he always gives very blunt answers. And he said, "Kristina, I'm too old to bother." And that's a humorous answer. I think after a while you just get tired of trying to be to everybody's liking, because if you are out in the world, you're bound to sometimes not be to everybody's taste. But when it comes to a more serious answer, I think once you try authenticity, it's not like a switch that you switch it on and off when you like it. It's more like a change of state. So the moment when you try what it means to be yourself, you suddenly realize that you just don't want to do the other way. It's like jumping out of the plane. When you are out of the plane, the only way is to land on the ground, hopefully with a parachute. You can't pack it up and say like, oh my God, what did I do? I'm going back to the plane. So with authenticity, it's the same. I think once you taste just being yourself and not trying too hard to please yourself, to please the others, to be to everybody's liking, to be a certain way that people expect you to be, then you just can't force yourself to go back and to play the game anymore. I think so. Maybe the interesting thing is that kids are born without this filter of what I'm supposed to be, and then we learn. But I think it's because kids are this way. They just learn the rules and they change themselves, and that's part of growing up. But as a grown-up, when you revert back to your natural state, then learning back, I guess you would need a serious trauma for that to happen.
Yeah. And I want to kind of go in two directions. I want to come back to you being an amazing mother, because I've seen it throughout all of these years. And I also want to talk about, for the people pleasers in the room who have a really, really hard time in staying with their authentic truth. And maybe it's cultural, maybe it's obligations, maybe it's niceties, societal pressures. What advice do you have for people pleasers who either are maybe joining the company and want to say yes to everything, but and cannot stick to their truth, or they're listening or watching this for the very first time, and they come up and they see your book Flawsome, they get it, yet they still, it's so hard to grasp. How can I stick to my own truth? Because I might not be accepted if I don't people please.
I think there are a lot of facets to that question. First of all, in psychology, there is a classical idea that if a problem took a certain time to happen, you will take almost like half of that time to get out of this problem. Now, I do not know the exact proportions, but basically, if you've been people pleaser for 40 years, that means that habit has been reinforced over and over again for a really long time. So for you to reprogram it, you obviously need some patience with yourself. And I'm not against mistakes. Now, the other interesting nuance about your question is that there is the people pleasing in your interaction with them, where you just try to be nice and smile, but then you don't like the people, and behind the back you might feel like, oh my God, I hate this person. And this is one type of people pleasing where it's just the way you interact with people. To this, I do not have much experience, so I can't probably answer. The other one is more about the boundaries, which is a somewhat different level of people pleasing, where you might not necessarily be nice to people, but you notice that you keep doing things for other people and you don't take care of your own well-being. Now with that, I still make mistakes, and it's I think it's fine to make mistakes, because we have so many people who are close and dear to us, our children, our families, our spouses, partners, to some people as parents. So this number of people may be quite big, who might maybe expect you to take care of them, at least to some degree. So I also make these mistakes. I often do things and I think, why did I get myself in again? So the question is not about making these mistakes, but actually noticing what's going on. And when that becomes a pattern and your default state, and you do not have time for yourself, then that's the time when you actually need to make changes in your life. Not so much maybe in your... I also sometimes don't like saying no or refusing, but if I see that this is becoming a pattern, let's say that person is expecting a certain behavior from me now on a regular basis because I, at one point, chose not to say no, then I'll just walk out of this room. I'm not going to stay too long in that circumstances. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's fine if you do it once in a blue moon. Yeah. It's not a problem. It happens. And as a mother, as a woman, it probably happens to us a little more than we'd like. But you really have to be aware of the big picture. And if you're not getting that break for a year or 2 or 3, then something is very, very wrong. And then my only advice is to find a good psychotherapist and actually work it through professionally. Because why do we always try to help ourselves? Yeah. Sometimes it's good to go to ask for help from a professional.
Yeah, it's so true. And in combination with that, I feel like your book is a great starting point, because you also do have many different tools in the book
I do have many different tools, but I think if you are in big trouble and you haven't been able to help yourself, you really have to ask for help. And that's another way of taking care of yourself and having those boundaries and not pleasing people.
Yeah, it's huge. And which brings me to our segue into motherhood. Hayden and Eve, I feel like I've seen Eve literally grow up in my face, being, part of this family for, I don't know, I think 10 years. And how have you been able to raise such incredible humans who I feel, and they interact with a ton of different people around the globe. Your kids are at every single event. They have been, and they've been trained to be when she was a baby even. And, Hayden, I think, is a teenager now. How have you been able to teach them the importance of embracing their flaws, not really people pleasing? It seems like they're so, like everyone's like waving at them or trying to talk to them or, trying to get into their vibe, and they're so in their own flow. And they could care less. And that's so powerful to see versus on the other end being, super front facing and always so energetically drained by saying hi to everybody all the time.
I think they do have very different personalities. So I think one of my kids is a little more like me in terms of mentality and personality, and the other one is a little more like my mother. But it's such a funny question because I do not know how to answer it in the sense like, how do you teach them? I guess maybe I can joke it off. There is a saying that no matter how well you teach your kids, they will still grow up to be exactly like you. So I think with kids very often, it's not like, how do you grow this plant? You probably create soil and some nutrition and some light, but the plant grows by itself. So an example would be Hayden did his SATs test recently, and when he came and told me the result, I was like, what? I didn't even know you. So for the curious people, he got 1,560.
Which is, I don't think I got even past 1,200 on the SATs. So, and he's only like 15 or 16, right?
He's 16. He still has a year to go in school. But
that's bananas.
I was surprised, and I was like, in a sense, I was thinking, I can't take the accolades for that in some way because I didn't do anything for that. But on the other hand, I do have principles how I interact with my children, and I do believe that these principles matter. So how I interact with them since a very early age, I understood that love alone is not enough. No matter how much we love children, but there is something more at play than just love for the kids to grow up into good, decent human beings. And Hayden, for example, has been a difficult child for me because he is neurodivergent, and for a few years I didn't know that, and I rejected that idea. I refused to test him. When I found out, things became much, much clearer. But these rules have always been there. I treat them as responsible, capable people, not grown-ups, of course, because they are not grown-up. So I do consider with the limitations that they might have. So Eve, for example, is still 10, and I understand that her emotional maturity is still cooking. So certain things I try to explain why, like motivations behind why I do certain things or make certain decisions, so that it is not just coming from up just because I decided so. So it's respect, it's trust that they're capable within their limits depending on their age, and it's also being present. That has always been a very important thing for me. So as I said, I'm a lazy person, so I've always had a lot of house help. But one reason why I always had homeschooling teachers, my kids go to school, but they also had teachers working for us, so that when they come from school and they have their free time and I'm still busy at work, they do something productive. And the logic for that was that when I come back home, we are all at leisure to just be and be present and not to feel stressed that we have to do something productively, because every one of us has put maximum during
so they
the day.
Had tutors.
They've always had, we call them nannies, but actually they were like more like home teachers,
okay,
who would take them to their extracurricular classes, do handicrafts with them, read, whatnot. So be productive. But the point of that was that I actually, when I come home, rather than stressing myself about being a good parent, I can just relax knowing that they have done their share of work as children, and I have done my share of work as a grown-up, and now what we can do is just be in each other's presence and just enjoy each other and be present and actually not be in our head somewhere else. So this has always been a very important part for me, that I have to see my kids at least once a day. I have to see them as they are, what's their state, how they're feeling, and let them be what they are. And sometimes I am perfectionist, like, oh, don't be so angry. And then I remind myself, what do you mean, don't be so angry? The kid is just angry. So a better question is like, yeah, so tell me what happened. Like, what makes you angry? Yeah, I'd be angry too, but what do we do with that? So it's not slacking on things that matter, which is their well-being, and being a little bit more chill about things which actually don't matter as much.
Ooh, those are some big codes there. I feel like I've taken some notes from you as well. I love that you shared to be able to teach them how and treat them like they are responsible and capable. Because many times we just think, oh, because of their age.
Yeah.
Oh, they're too little. Oh, they won't know. Oh, you've got to talk to them like a baby. No, actually treat them like they are responsible and capable humans.
Yeah.
And
I've had some hard conversations with my children, which I had to have, because you have to realize they see things, they understand things. They might not always be able to express themselves because their vocabulary is limited, because they don't understand emotions the same way, but they see and they feel. And later it all comes out as some subconscious programming and traumas, and we're like, where did it come from? It's because nobody bothered to sit down and explain to you what's going on.
Well, and I want to wrap this segment of our conversation in, because you just shared that sometimes you had to have these difficult conversations. And I think for a lot of parents, families, moms who have to have these conversations with their kids, you've navigated conscious uncoupling, divorce so well with your partner. And it was actually very public, the way you both did that. It was very public, and it was respectful. There was reverence there, and you still travel the world together, as much as I know.
Yeah.
And you do it with grace. And I feel like so many people are curious to know, well, how did they do that? And they have 2 grown kids. How can we do that? What did she tell her kids? How did that even come up? And your families are still, I've seen your parents, I've seen Bhushan's parents, I've seen you guys all interact.
So you probably know that, because when I was getting married, I was told, my ex-husband is Indian, that in Indian culture, you're not just marrying a person, you're marrying one family marries another family. So when we uncoupled with Bhushan, it was our decision that we'll only dissolve one part of our relationship, but we are not going to dissolve other parts of our relationship, as in, yes, we're not lovers anymore, but we're still parents, and our families are still one family. I know it is a little bit hard and tricky, especially if somebody wants to find another partner. It is a little tough, of course, to accept that there is a family that's coming from previous life, and that family is big. But I do want to say that I don't give a qualifier to our uncoupling. Yes, we did it. We followed the teachings of Catherine Woodward Thomas. She's the person who came up with this concept. But it hasn't been easy. It's not perfect, and there are emotions attached to that. And conscious uncoupling doesn't mean that everything is just rainbow and unicorns. It actually means that you keep reminding yourself what's your ultimate objective or what's your ultimate intention. And our intention was to keep it as natural and easy as possible to everyone involved. So just because me and Bhushan don't sleep in the same bed together doesn't mean that our parents shouldn't interact. Our children shouldn't have both parents in their lives. We do travel together with kids. It is logistically very easy when one of your kids is a boy and another one is a girl.
We got lucky that way.
But when it comes to communicating it to the kids, this was this one time when I called my friend who is a psychotherapist specializing on relationships between children and parents, Shelley Lefko. I really love this
I
woman.
love Shelley. Shout out to Shelley.
Yes, and she guided us how to deal with that, because some decisions in life are so important and we think that we can wing it, but it's better to be safe, just consult, ask for opinion of the person who understands.
And here we are today, your book. I want to segue into our final segment here as we end. What is one word that describes this season of life?
I was thinking about that. I used to have a word for every year, but this year I have been kind of going along. Maybe spontaneity. You know what I mean.
Spontaneity.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
It was so spontaneous, I couldn't even pronounce the word.
This is good. This is good for you.
Yeah.
And where can we follow you? Where can we find your book? Where can everyone go and run and grab the book?
As a co-founder of Mindvalley, you'll find me in Mindvalley. Always and forever. But my book is on Amazon, and it might still be in some of the bookshops in US. I do not know. I haven't been there in a while.
Perfect.
Actually, when I was last time there, it was still there. I was so excited.
I think it's in pretty much every airport, bookstore, everywhere. We were both pubbed by the same publisher, Hay House, Penguin Random House. So Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, it was such a pleasure. I'm so glad that we were able to do this.
Thank you so much. It was such a nice conversation, and I really appreciate you having me.
You are such a light, and I hope that everyone got a chance to see your radiance and your essence, and really you are that true grounding force behind what so many people have had such amazing transformations in their life. And it started because of the backbone of one human. So
thank you for acknowledging it.
All right, loves. Wow. We are ending this episode, and I am so excited to share that we are going to put Kristina's link in the show notes. And if you are going to follow Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, she is also on Instagram. You can follow her anywhere on the Mindvalley platforms as well. She started a new venture, which is Mindvalley Book Club Official, which is also on Instagram. I will link all of those in the show notes. If you are curious and want to go deeper into your own flaws and recognizing and making peace with some of the things that are maybe uncomfortable, or maybe your own truths, or maybe you heard about Shelley Lefko and you want to learn more about her, I'm going to link her episode in the show notes, as well as 2 other episodes to actually learn how to forgive yourself, to make peace with yourself, and to really love yourself. And so I will link those in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram. And we are The Brave Table on Instagram, as well as Neeta Bhushan on YouTube. And if you loved this episode, go ahead and share what you loved in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can tag us what were your favorite parts of this episode with Kristina. Anything changed your perspective, go ahead and tag us at The Brave Table or Neeta Bhushan or even Kristina Mand-Lakhiani on Instagram. We would so love to hear from you. It is my honor to serve you every single week. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you haven't already written us a 5-star review, what in the world are you waiting for? If this episode changed your life in any way, please share this with a friend, a colleague, a bestie, a mom, somebody that's going through some hard times, and maybe they need to believe in themselves again, to believe in their flaws, to believe that they can put themselves first, and so much more. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next time. Don't forget to be just a little bit more brave.